Learning this groove from Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears will improve your four-way coordination and make you a better drummer for a lot of reasons, so it is totally worth learning. I'll share with you what this groove will make you better at that'll apply across the board to your drumming, and I'll show you step-by-step how to play it. I'll also show you another song I played in church recently that features the same drum part, believe it or not. Let's dig in. Hey, as we get rolling today, be sure to grab my free gift to you in the description below, the 3-part daily 30-minute practice routine that gives you all the core essentials you need to make sure you're practicing productively, even if you're busy and you just have 30 minutes. It breaks down the essentials of hand technique, gives you a bunch of coordination exercises you can work on to free your feet and build more fluidity around the kit. And we even talk about music and listening skills. All the essentials if you're tight on time, but you want to be a well-rounded drummer and know that you're growing so you're not getting stuck in ruts. This is a guide for you. Totally free, no brainer. Check it out, download it, take it to your practice room. All right, on with today's lesson. 3 things that mastering this groove will help you do that are definitely related to this type of groove, but that also carry across the board with your drumming. Number 1, conquer the 3/2 polyrhythm, which is a very common polyrhythm, and it's not that difficult to play, but it shows up in music all the time. So very important to learn and get comfortable with. Number 2, play a 12/8 feel comfortably. Without getting into the music theory here, a 12/8 feel is any of those grooves that are kind of the boom, 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 that sort of feel. Heartache Tonight by the Eagles is another example of that. There's a lot of songs from the 70s and 80s that have that kind of feel. And number 3, you'll be able to stay relaxed and not rush and not get choppy on slow grooves, especially slow grooves that are triplet based instead of being straight. It's really easy to rush these slow triplet based grooves because even though this particular song that we're talking about today is kind of up tempo, because it's triplet based, it's easy to rush it. It's easier for you to trip over yourself while you're playing it. So we want to make sure we're staying relaxed. So learning this is going to help you a lot with that, which will carry over to a lot of other slow songs and ballads too. So those are the 3 big reasons. So even if you're not super into this particular song, these are skills we all need to have. So we're basically going to break this whole process down in 3 steps, and we're going to eventually put the groove together and be able to play the groove as well as some different fills that you might use in this kind of feel. And I will share with you that other song that I played in church recently that if you're a fellow church drummer, maybe you've played this, maybe you've heard it, but it's a song that's a very similar feel to Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Very interesting because there haven't been a lot of worship songs that have that feel, so we'll get into that a little later too. But step 1, we want to talk about the 3/2 polyrhythm because that's essentially what's happening when you're playing this groove where you're doing it's that right hand pattern that makes this difficult. You know, if we were just playing, or even if it was just, that'd be a lot more straightforward. But instead we're doing this weird pattern where the right hand doesn't start on beat 1, it's shifted over. But when we really break this down, we look at what are our hands doing, all that's happening is our hands are playing a 3/2 polyrhythm against each other. So a 3/2 polyrhythm, I call it the Carol of the Bells polyrhythm, because if you hear that, the Carol of the Bells rhythm, bum 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 bum. If you play it like that, or both hands play together on beat 1, then you end up with, for every 3 notes that the right hand plays, the left hand plays 2 notes, which is the definition of a 3/2 polyrhythm, where for every 3 notes here, every 2 notes here, they then line up, they reset after those 2 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We've talked about this in some lessons before where we break down the 4/3, where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Same concept with that. I'll link those videos in the description below if you want to check out the 4/3. But the 3/2 is a little bit simpler because there's less notes and it generally happens in a more slow context. So it's, you could also think of it just as both right, left, right, both right, left, right, both right, left, right. Definitely don't have to overthink it. It's very simple. Both right, left, right, both right, left, right. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And we feel it in a triple meter, like a 3 meter, where we're counting to 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or we could count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. That's naturally how we want to feel that. Both right, left, right. Both right, left, right. 1, 2, 1, 2. So it kind of feels like the left hand's doing the syncopated thing. So if you can get comfortable doing that, just practice that on your snare, on your legs, on your practice pad, whatever you want to do, or you could do left hand on the snare, right hand on the ride or on the hats. And what we want to do first, so if you can play the 3/2 with your hands, then practice doing it with your right hand and your right foot. So both hand, foot, hand, both hand, foot, hand, both hand, foot, hand. Same pattern, but right hand and right foot. So now is the part where it gets kind of weird. And so what I want to do is just let you listen to it, show this to you, and try to not over-explain it. I don't want it to be like a music theory mumbo-jumbo kind of thing where it doesn't actually make a lot of sense. But what we're doing is essentially, we're still playing a 3/2 polyrhythm, but we're starting it at a different place. Or you can think of it as we're shifting the right hand over, because what's happening in that groove is we're starting out with the kick on beat 1, but then the right hand comes in immediately after, like this. And so we're going, you could think of this as foot, hand, both, hand, foot, hand, both, hand, foot, hand, both, hand, foot, hand, both, hand, foot, hand, both, hand. So now it's on beats 2 and 4 as we're turning this into a groove where hi-hat and kick are locking together, because instead of starting the hi-hat on beat 1, we're shifting it over. So this is the thing you want to focus all your time and energy on in your practicing if you're trying to master this groove, because this is most likely the hardest part of it. So if you can get that comfortable, again, to kind of review this, 1, 2, 1, 2. And so that's one of those things, when I learned this song, I didn't sit there and analyze it. I just listened to it and then played what I heard. That's probably what you should do. You should probably play what you hear and practice just going foot, hand, both, hand, foot, hand, both. I think that's the most logical way to do it. Don't overanalyze it. If my explanations there didn't all entirely make sense, that's okay. And just listen to the song, listen to the groove so that you hear how that's supposed to happen. And before you know it, it will start coming together, because the only thing we've got to add next is the snare on beat 2 and 4, which is happening with the right hand. So it's not actually that difficult of a thing to add. So that's the thing to remember. On beats 1 and 3, there's only kick. On beats 2 and 4, there's everything. And there's those other notes with the right hand in between. And as soon as you're able to start piecing this together, what you've got to do to really solidify the coordination is listen specifically to different parts of what you're playing. So play through it, looping it over and over again, really listening to the kick drum. How is the kick feeling? Left hand's playing on 2 and 4, so then practice just listening to that left hand, making sure it's feeling good and locking with the kick. And then what's a little tougher is just listening to the right hand and trying to focus all of your ear on what your right hand's doing while keeping this going. But that's how you really build coordination and how you learn to be independent with this and be able to manipulate things. And so with anything new you learn on the drums, that should always be your next step, where you're trying to listen intentionally to each different part of what you're doing and then learn to manipulate it. That's where you learn to improvise and be spontaneous with it, and that's where the true freedom, true four-way coordination begins. Now, if you're playing Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, there's not a lot of fills to worry about, but really our step 3 here is putting together some fills, figuring out what are some different patterns we could play to add in fills. Most of what's happening in Everybody Wants to Rule the World is very simple. Ba, 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 left hand following the right hand. So and so everything's fitting into that framework. There's never anything out of the box like that's a fill you're definitely not going to hear in that song because it doesn't really fit the groove. It doesn't feel right. And so there's not a lot of fills, and whenever a fill happens, it's just left hand doing something on the snare and then hitting a crash there on that offbeat along with the snare, which is just the rhythm of the hi-hat, and so that's why you want to get so solid with that hi-hat pattern. So I'm just going to show you a couple different fill ideas that could work in Tears for Fears, but most likely you would just use in some other song that has this feel, because these are not fills that I've pulled from this song. These are just some fill ideas you can use. So the whole goal here, the whole context is that we don't want to rush, we want to stay relaxed. So most fundamentally, practice playing triplets. You could have your feet playing quarters at the same time. If you've never done that before, it's tricky because every other beat, the leading hand shifts in a way. So right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And so left has to lock with the kick, and then right has to lock with the kick. So that alone can be a challenge. So practice that slowly. That's something you can also do on your pad, just practicing those triplets. Big, open, loose, making sure you're not stiff, making sure you're not getting clumsy or sloppy with it. Keep everything relaxed. Practice that with your metronome on your pad. If you're doing Everybody Wants to Rule the World, that tempo is 112, and so that's your goal tempo, and it's really beneficial to practice that slower also to get it just very relaxed and smooth so that it's not at all wanting to rush when you get it up to 112. But the other kind of fill that's really cool is doing triplets by going snare, snare, kick, snare, snare, kick. So 1, let, 2, let. And so when you end, you'll do 2 kicks in a row, so then you could hit a crash. It's very easy to rush that. It's very easy for it to get sloppy. So practice that very slow at first. You could also do something that's just like a back and forth between hands and foot, like, which kind of takes on an interesting feel. You probably wouldn't use that in Everybody Wants to Rule the World, but it's an idea for, you know, a song like this. And so you're still playing triplets, but it's a back and forth between toms or snare and kick, so it takes on an interesting feel. And so you might finish that with 2 notes with your hands. That way you can finish it out and then hit a crash. And so beat 4 ends up being kick, hand, hand, crash. 4, let, crash. And so that's the way you generally want to end it if you're doing a fill like that. But of course, there's so many other combinations you could do. But those are some great core ones where if you can get really comfortable with that, you could even try doing something like, or start it on the kick. So many things you could do. And if you practice those things very slowly with the goal of getting them smooth so they're feeling good at that tempo of 112 eventually, that's going to help your playing so much across the board, because doing these slow triplet feels forces you to relax. Forces you to relax because they want to rush so badly. So if you teach yourself not to rush, to stay relaxed when playing triplets, that's going to help so much in so many areas if you're playing. Now, say you want to just practice on your pad, or you've got to spend time away from your drums, or you're needing to practice quietly. You can totally get really solid with this groove, and even with some of these fills, just with a practice pad. If you're just playing on your pad, maybe that's all you're able to do, or maybe that's what you want to do so that you can just focus on hand looseness and everything. Then sit here, practice those triplets. 2, let, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Practice them quietly too, and definitely practice like 90, 100, then work your way up to 112. It's important to be able to do these slowly, but practice those triplets a bunch. Practice going 1, let, 2, let, 3, let, 4, let, doing different patterns like that where you're leaving out certain notes, because that's going to translate to what you might do on the kick. Because you can also practice doing these with your feet tapping on the floor, like hand, foot, hand, 2, 3, 4, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, boom, boom. So you can practice those same fills on your pad, stomping your feet if you need to do that also. Or you could literally practice the hand pattern of the groove on your pad. Bum, 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 bum. Hey, I mentioned earlier there was a song I played in church that is so similar to Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and it's called The Same Jesus by Matt Redman. And it's a really cool, really fun song that is very much inspired by, I haven't talked to Matt Redman about this, but it sounds like it's very much inspired by Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And there's actually a moment, the second half of the first verse of the song, where the drummer is playing that pattern we talked about today, that same pattern. What makes this song challenging though, so Everybody Wants to Rule the World is 112, that's the tempo. This song is 105. So it's enough slower that it just has a very relaxed kind of feel. And there are moments in it where you're doing builds with triplets that you can do with the floor tom too. There's a lot more dynamic range in this song, like a lot of worship songs where there are dropouts and then builds and everything. And so that actually adds a lot of challenge to it compared to Everybody Wants to Rule the World, where once you can play that groove, you've pretty much got it. So there are more challenging fill opportunities in the Same Jesus also, because you're not always going to play the same fill. There are different things you might want to try. And so it's a great song for practicing this kind of feel at a slightly slower tempo, forcing you to be relaxed and make sure you're not rushing, because it's so easy to rush this song. And so my tempo recommendations would definitely be to practice all of this at 90, 95, 100. Once you get it 105, play along to the Same Jesus. Find it on Spotify, Matt Redman. Practice along to that and learn some of those parts, especially in the bridge where there's a tom thing. And playing like tom kind of builds in this feel was so foreign to me the first time I played it. It just felt weird. It was like taking Everybody Wants to Rule the World, but suddenly mixing up the drum parts a bunch and slowing them down, which interestingly enough made it more difficult. So simple, but yet very challenging song to play well. So definitely check that one out. And then continue to work the tempo up, 105, 110, 112 for Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And then there are other 80s songs and 70s songs too that have that kind of feel. You can continue practicing even faster and get more and more comfortable with it. Now, obviously, these types of grooves require a level of coordination. And if you feel like you're struggling at all in that area, definitely check out the guide I told you about earlier. The Know What to Practice 3-part daily practice routine. You've only got 30 minutes a day to practice. This is it. We break it down. We break down your practice session into 3 main parts: hand technique, coordination, and music. The coordination part is really the bulk of this guide. And we go through all sorts of different exercises you can do to build your coordination and to increase your ability to play weird things like this. And so we talk about jazz, Latin, and even doing other styles like that, which helps so much with your rock playing and with playing weird feels like this 12/8 sort of thing from Everybody Wants to Rule the World and the Same Jesus and a lot of other songs from the 70s and 80s. So if you're trying to increase your fluidity, you're trying to increase your 4-way coordination, you want to just be freer overall on the drums, definitely check out the 3-part daily practice routine guide. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, become a fellow non-glamorous drummer, focusing on the nitty-gritty core techniques that really help us become the drummers we're made to be. So if that's you, if you're into this kind of learning, then join us. There's a bunch of other nitty-gritty non-glamorous lessons here on the channel, so I hope you'll check out some more of those. Stay non-glamorous. I'll see you on the next lesson.